help is a 4-letter word.
Right.
Stop is a 4-letter word. We don't use those words. Like, these are not on the option table because they somehow weaken us. That's kind of that mentality. And it's still the mentality of a lot of people saying help or I need help or please help me. That's a 4-letter word, and we are weakened if we have to say it. So that's not on the option list. Saying stop, are you kidding me? We were talking about opening more stores. Stop. There was no stop. There was, what else can I do?
No, it's certainly, I'm curious, it sounds like a very long-standing perception, belief, part of culture for you.
Yeah, it's very much, I think, a very Appalachian
Right. So
plow
tell us
through
about,
and carry on.
tell us about that,
Yeah,
to make that distinction for many. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very different. I grew up in a family business. My grandfather started a business long before I was born, but he very highly intelligent. He used the Korean War to get the GI Bill and get an engineering degree after being in a coal mine at like 14, 15 years old. He went, that's not happening. Not staying here. And so he went and got a degree in engineering, and he opened his own shop and got all of his brothers out of the shop. My dad, my uncles all worked in there. They either have engineering degrees or business and accounting degrees. I went to journalism school. But that was the mentality, you go down into a coal mine and you keep working because the guy beside you is working too, and you can't let him down. It's that very team mentality. You can't let him down because by letting him down, it may cause an accident and he may fall. And so that was very much the family mentality because they all, all of my great uncles all came out of that coal mine. They all thought that way. We work not for us, but for the people around us, for the people we love, for the people we care about. And that's how we show them that we love them. And it's very Appalachian culture. So it was for audience of one, but it was that little voice in the back of your head that says you have to keep going. You have to, if you plow through it, you'll get to, there's a finish line. We have a fictional finish line. I grew up, I was an alpine skier, alpine ski racer. I did a lot of that in a lot of super G races and that kind of thing. And, when you can go 60, 70 miles an hour on your skis straight down the mountain to the finish line, you tend to pick up the same traits and put them in other parts of your life. There's a finish line, except there's not a finish line. That's that, again, that narrative. You'll get to the bottom eventually. The finish line is so close. You're this close. You're almost there. Just a little bit more. And every day it's that same justification, however it's going through your brain. And if you just get through these 2 or 3 things the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks, it'll be fine after that. And we keep moving the finish line and putting ourselves further and further in the hole.
I like the way you put that, moving the finish line, like moving the goalposts. So there's always, what I know from working with athletes and other high performers, and especially what you're telling me, there's something almost intoxicating about being able to push past pain. It feels like mastery, like proof that you're built differently. When did you first realize that what you were calling strength was actually a form of essentially disappearing from yourself?
Have you ever faced a moment that changed everything? A loss, a new path, or an awakening that forced you to rewrite your life? Pivot Point is a podcast that explores those stories. I'm Nik Michael. We'll dive into how pain can spark growth and how crisis leads to clarity. Subscribe to Pivot Point today.
Welcome. This is Pivot Point, Strategy for Change. I'm Nik Michael. This podcast, we explore how real change often begins not with a clear decision, but with a disruption. Sometimes it arrives disguised as exhaustion. Sometimes it looks like stopping when everything around us keeps moving. And sometimes it isn't a choice at all. It's a demand. Today's guest is Erin Treacy, founder of Erin Treacy Coaching, where she works with leaders, professionals, and teams across Appalachia and beyond to build steadier workplaces, clearer communication, and more sustainable paths to growth. Her work is grounded in a simple but radical idea that the most effective leaders aren't the ones who can handle the most. They're the ones who have learned to listen before something forces them to stop. But Erin's expertise didn't begin in a coaching framework or a leadership manual. It began in her body. She describes her pivot point not as a strategic decision or a quiet realization, but as a full stop, a moment when outwardly she was still functioning, still showing up, still being depended on, while inwardly her system had reached a limit she could no longer negotiate with. What followed wasn't just recovery, it was a reckoning, a dismantling of long-held beliefs about strength, control, and what it actually means to lead with capacity rather than through collapse. In our conversation today, we'll explore what burnout looks like from the inside, how high-capacity professionals can mistake crisis for competence, and how the body often speaks long before the mind is ready to listen. We'll talk about agency, not as control, but as responsiveness, about limits, not as weakness, but as intelligence, and about what it looks like to rebuild a definition of success that doesn't require self-erasure to sustain. Erin brings both personal clarity and professional depth to this conversation. And I think what she has to say will land for anyone who has ever kept all the balls in the air while quietly running on empty. Erin, it truly is a privilege to have you here. Welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. What pivot would you like to share most?
When I think about pivots, quiet pivots are a place where I think it's a good pivot. It's the loud pivots that are far more painful sometimes and uncomfortable, but uncomfortable is a good thing. And we need to start seeing it that way. We think of uncomfort as negative, but it's those uncomfortable moments that get us where we're supposed to be and that are good for us. And we have to have them.
So was there a particular point in your life where things began to shift? And what I'm always concerned or looking to explore further, the really most important piece here that separates what I do here from others, usually a change occurs either on an emotional feeling level, a cognitive thinking level, and then perhaps on a physical level. And that decision gets made at that moment, even long before the change occurs physically when someone changes their lives. Where was that for you? When did you actually have that real pivot point moment?
I think there have been several pivot points across life. The one that I kind of framed happened just a few years ago. I had our restaurants. We had a couple of different locations. You're running restaurants through the mass chaos that is COVID and post-COVID and all of the realities that we all lived through in that. And then I had ignored a lot of different issues that were going on and instead just worked through it. The harder I worked, the more I helped the people around me, the more I was a team player, the more I made sure all of my people at work were good, all my people at home were good. And, you're in that constant, let me maintain and juggle all of these balls that I hold on to. And I was on our cook line one day because I really have a very strong people first, work with the team to be there with them and support them. And I'm standing on the cook line and I go to turn and my entire right leg had gone numb. Later, found out I had severely compressed discs in my lower back. They were actually shocked that I had not come in for medical attention earlier. Learned I had a really high pain tolerance because I'd been taking Tylenol and Advil and just, head down, plow through, keep going. And my body said, no more, no more. And it was a mandated pivot to sit. And then the quiet happened. You had to stop. You had to pause and you had to figure out how to reset. And that was really kind of that clarity moment where you could look back and go, well, this is how long my back hurt. But this is how long before that I was somebody who'd never got sick for years. And all of a sudden I was constantly sick. Every cold, every flu, every small little bug was something big. And you really started to dig back and the exhaustion. And you went, wow, I've been doing this for probably 5 or 6 years before I ever got to my body was done.
You're listening to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. If today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It truly helps others find the show and supports the work we're doing here. You can find Pivot Point Strategy for Change on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like a deeper dive into the work we explore on the show, I invite you to visit my Substack page where I share in-depth articles and reflections. Before your body refused to continue, you were still functioning and being depended on. What did functioning look like from the outside, and what was happening internally that others couldn't see?
I think so. My husband has talked about it in the time since then, and he noticed it long before I did, and was you have to stop, you have to pause, you have to rest, you sit down. It was to the point where he doesn't work in the restaurant. The restaurant wasn't his, but he would be like, no, I'll go in and clean the fryers for you so that you can just. You have to promise, though, you're not allowed to get on the computer and do emails and do an food order. You can't do a schedule. You literally have to sit there and rest and relax. And so he noticed those things long before I did. Knew I was on edge. I knew that sometimes I was being short with people that I really didn't mean to. Like I would catch myself doing it and they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Like we understand, we know it's a lot of stress and it's a lot of things and a lot's going on. And so people tended to try to be as helpful as they could in that process. Inside, it felt like you were juggling bricks, not balls.
I'm curious about what were you aware of that you noticed first, but then I'm going to use the word compartmentalized, or maybe there's another word that you could use because you mentioned just tough. Maybe you were toughing it out and just going on. What were you most aware of first? Was it a cognitive or physical or emotional kind of impact that it had?
I knew I had back pain, but I mean, how many people in their 40s don't have back pain, right? Like we write that off. I knew I got colds and headaches. Don't all adults get colds and headaches? So you write that off. I knew I was balancing businesses. Isn't this what all the other people who own businesses look like, feel like? You assume all of these things that must be what everybody feels like. So you write them off and push them away, especially if you aren't ready to face those realities yet. If you're not really ready to go, okay, I'm ready to listen. I know something's wrong. What is it? If we're not ready for that moment, then we don't see it either. And we just assume this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to, and then we fill in the gaps. I'm supposed to fill in my calendar so it's full every minute of every day, every minute accounted for. I'm supposed to juggle all of the things. I'm supposed to be the perfect wife, the perfect mom, the perfect boss, the perfect business owner. You're supposed to. And we kind of write that off in our brain. And then all the things around us start to crumble. You see stress. You see people avoiding you. You see that your friends maybe they don't want to be around you as much, not because they don't love you, but they know you're stressed and they may also be afraid you're going to bite their head off too. And so people tiptoe around you a little bit more and you start to notice some of those things. And then you just get mad, right? Because now you're in the fog of all of the things. So they don't show up for me like they used to. Well, you've made it almost impossible for them to show up for you because you have gone so far down this hole.
As I'm listening, I'm trying to imagine everyone around you, because most people in situations like yours, you didn't ignore what was happening because you were foolish or weak. You ignored it because the mind in general is extraordinarily good at generating reasons to continue. Sometimes it's called compartmentalization. Sometimes it's functional denial. The I'll deal with this later, that keeps getting deferred. The story we tell ourselves becomes the permission slip to keep going. What was that story for you? There's a version of denial that doesn't look like denial at all. It looks like discipline or commitment or just getting on with it. And I think high achievers are particularly skilled at constructing internal narratives that make continuing feel not just necessary, but right. What story were you telling yourself at the time that justified just pushing through it?
That's what I'm supposed to do. I have to make sure my people get paid. We were in COVID and you're in lockdowns and you're trying to figure out how to keep a business functioning and paid, and you have these people looking at you and they need paychecks because to eat still. And, they're all trying to figure this out. And it's like, well, I have to make sure they get something. So you're hustling to figure out how to do that. And what's the way you could be open, but be safe and follow whatever the different things are. So it was never like it didn't enter your brain in that period of time as a restaurant owner in COVID. Like, everybody else was having questions about what COVID was. My question was, how do I keep the people I can employ employed and pay my bills and not end up, in some horrible financial place. So the brain tells you you have to do this to help them. You have to do this to pay your own bills. You have to do this because these are the things that have to get done to make work function tomorrow. These are the people who are relying on you. You've got food vendors, you've got other vendors, you've got catering orders, you have all of these things. And the more you hold on really, really tightly to all of those things, the more you can control them all. I don't
Yeah,
need an
no.
assistant manager to take over a project. I need to do it because if I do it, it's all in one place and I can be able to make sure they're all right. And then we start to question what is right. Like my right isn't your right, but if they both got us there, who cares? And so you start to kind of come out of that pivot and go, that's the pivot. I have to stop caring if they did it my way. I just need it done.
So when you look back at the story that you were telling yourself and the reasons, do you think it was protecting you from something in the world around you, or was it protecting an idea of who you were supposed to be? Because I want to ask something that follows from that. Were you in some way performing resilience for an audience, even if it was an audience of one? At the very same time, your body was quietly, it seems like it was quietly staging a protest against your performance.
So it was very much the audience of one.
Hmm.
I don't know that, like I said, my
Self-imposed?
husband was the one saying, you need to slow down. You need to
Hmm.
stop this. You are becoming very, very different. You're very moody. And, he was the one who kind of took those measures even for me and on my behalf. And I have to say, a lot of the employees that had been with me for a long time, because I had that very people first leadership and been right with them and side by side, they could see a lot of those changes and they knew they weren't me. So they would try to pick up the slack where they could, but I was in I have to control it. So it was for audience of one, but it was that little voice in the back of your head that says you have to keep going. You have to, if you plow through it, you'll get to, there's a finish line. We have a fictional finish line. I grew up, I was an alpine skier, alpine ski racer. I did a lot of that in a lot of super G races and that kind of thing. And when you can go 60, 70 miles an hour on your skis straight down the mountain to the finish line, you tend to pick up the same traits and put them in other parts of your
Yes.
life. There's a finish line, except there's not a finish line. That's that again, that narrative. You'll get to the bottom eventually. The finish line is so close. You're this close. You're almost there. Just a little bit more. And every day it's that same justification, however it's going through your brain. And if you just get through these two or three things the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks, it'll be fine after that. And we keep moving the finish line and putting ourselves further and further in the hole.
I like the way you put that, moving the finish line, like moving the goalposts. So there's always what I know from working with athletes and other high performers, and especially what you're telling me, there's something almost intoxicating about being able to push past pain. It feels like mastery, like proof that you're built differently. When did you first realize that what you were calling strength was actually a form of essentially disappearing from yourself?
It wasn't until the pivot and the act and the real resilience part. Like I'm stopped dead in my tracks. I am at no more function, in pause. And so you start to piece back together, what do I want life to look like? And that's where that's how I got here. You had to have that moment of like the fog lifting, the pause. I equate it to, like the band on the bottom of the YouTube video. It's like it hasn't fully caught up yet. You have to pause it so it can catch up so you can play the rest of the video. That was what my pause was. And that's the part that had that mental shift in, okay, I don't need to be in pain to run a business. I don't have to prove myself in that way. It actually didn't make me stronger. It broke me. And being able to see it then let you then look back so that then you can create the next step in that resilience of, okay, that's how I know what not to do and how to move forward outside of that. It is not a bragging point that I have back pain every day.
Mm. Yeah, I know. I can't imagine that you would be bragging about that.
But you
I would
would like,
imagine.
yeah, I have back pain, but I'm fine. I'm on the cook
Right, but
line.
you would
See me
say,
do the
I'm
thing.
going to push
Right?
through it. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
there's a badge of honor. So was your pivot gradual or sudden? If you can.
It was probably some of both. So there was the forced stop in the pivot that was sudden. I mean, who could see the compressions got so bad that your right leg went numb and you can't drive home from work? That you don't, I didn't even know, like I said, I didn't even know what it was. I had back pain. I never saw a doctor. I never asked at any time about it. I just took the medicine and moved on. Or, just like I said, the Tylenol, the Advil, and moved on type of thing. So it wasn't until I started working through those things and the doctor's like taking an x-ray and going, so we have this x-ray of these compressed discs. We're going to go in and do some CT scans because we think there's a herniated disc over here. And, there's this nerve pain that we're talking about in that right leg over there. And so you start really to travel that medical path. And as you learn through the medical path of what's wrong with you is where the quiet pivot started. Okay, how do I not have pain for the next hour that
Mm,
doesn't involve medication? Right? So that's your quiet. How do I today, what's going to be good for me? Walking is very, very good for lower back discompression. So it was, planning those, even if it's a short walk, I would leave and like leave work and do a walk around the parking lot or a walk around the restaurant just to walk. And again, it was a quiet pivot. It was, 5 minutes of just a walk, just to move and get out of those kind of positions. So it was, those became kind of the everyday, the quiet. Okay, how do I rebuild? Okay, how's the next rebuild? Okay, look, that worked. So what's the next rebuild? And so those are the quiets. I think those are so much easier to manage. And that's why I tell people my story and really talk about that pause and that pivot. Because if you can have those quiet pivots, you can actually build on each one and really master each one and kind of move to the next and get way further along and see so much more improvement in a much shorter period of time than the big, massive blow up of body stopping type of stuff.
right. So how did you manage the discomfort of not being able to rely on your usual way of coping or living?
There was a lot of discomfort. There was a
Mm,
constant no, but, we can no, but our way. I agree, but out of a lot of different things. And it was really kind of my husband. If we make the joke, I don't hear no real well, that independent, high achieving self. You tell me no, and I'm going to show you how no is wrong. Like that's just my mentality. That athlete thing. Maybe that's what makes me an athlete because of athletics. That I don't know which way chicken or the egg on that one, but it was really kind of him going, this is done. This is over. Your body is unfunctional. And for once, foot is down. And I thank him in a lot of ways for that. But it wasn't, I had to stop. It was doing this the way you're doing it has to stop, right? Like he didn't, I am man in charge. It was, no, we're going to make sure you're taken care of. And by we, I mean, you're going to take care of yourself.
yeah, I can imagine. It seems like your husband made a choice in that moment that most people close to a high achiever never make. It sounds like he refused to be recruited into that pattern that you previously had. What was it like to be essentially loved by someone in a way that wouldn't cooperate with your own self-destruction? Because for so many high achievers, persistence feels virtuous. What helped you reframe stopping as strength rather than failure, you know?
Well, and we tend to push those people away,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
we just keep, no, 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 they're telling me no. So they get farther and farther and farther, which is like I say, a lot of friends you realize, are a little farther away and not, but you push them there.
yeah.
And he wasn't having it. And that was hard. I look at him some days like he was a crazy person. Like, what do you mean? Oh, and he's like, well, you can't drive the car because your leg's numb. So I'll just go ahead and take all the car keys. And now I'm left at home. And
Oh,
I
that must have been
physically
frustrating, though.
can't sneak into the car to get to the restaurant. Like, he would think out. He's like, I know what she's going to do. I know how she thinks. Like, I'm getting ahead of this one. And he would even plan other things. He works in television. So he has a very weird schedule, he covers sports. So we talk a lot about sports in our house. So because he does that as well, he has a Tuesday off, which, as a restaurant owner, it's like, okay, yeah, let's take a Tuesday off. And he would, hiking is good for back pain and for compressed discs. We just happen to go into the mountains where there's no cell service. So I can't call and check on the store or check my emails or call any of the people I may have to have a call with. Isn't that magical how he did that to me? And then when you get to the top of the mountain from this lovely hike that we go on, I'm like, okay, I don't need to send emails today. You're right. This is what I needed to do. And so he would even, he's very tricky some days, but I'm so grateful for it. And then you go, how much further down that rabbit hole could I have gotten myself?
Yeah. Listening to the way you describe it, one thing that strikes me most about what you've mentioned is that you weren't oblivious. You were intelligent and self-aware, and yet the system still collapsed. And psychologists talk about compartmentalization, that ability to wall off what's happening in one part of our experience so we can keep functioning in another. But there's also something more subtle. The story we construct to justify continuing, it's not denial exactly.
Mm-mm.
It's more like a private negotiation that we hold with ourselves, with that in mind. And what story were you telling yourself at the time that justified pushing through?
I have to do this for all of these other people relying on
Hmm.
me. If I don't, how will they all function? How will they all get by? And I think all people kind of have a certain level of
Yeah.
that. But I have a very mom mentality just in general. It's that let's make sure everybody's taken care of. It's one of the reasons I went into restaurants, feeding people. It's how I still get my college kids home. Hey, guess what? Mom's making dinner from scratch tonight. Magically, they all show up. It's amazing how that works. So it's that mentality too. So it's I'm caring for everybody else. I don't need taken care of. It's fine. I don't need taken care of. I take care of me and I take care of all of you. And if I don't, all of you are going to fall on your face and it's going to be my fault.
Well, there's taking a lot of extra responsibility. So did you believe that story completely, or was there a quieter part of you that already knew it really wasn't true, but you,
I think there's that always that there was elements that you kind of knew that it wasn't true, but you kind of thought that it was, that both having kids of a varying age, we blended family 27 to 20 now. So, some were young teenagers, even into college age at the time. And so, just like we tell ourselves our kids can't function without us doing the things and we have to take care of this or that for our kids. It's like, no. I mean, at 15, they can do their own laundry, right? Like they don't need me to do that. But we tell ourselves that because that's how we love them is by doing these things for them. And so the same thing carries through in a lot of that work is, I mean, yes, you did know, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, they could probably do it, but they'll do it better because I'm doing it.
no,
Right.
I'm
Or
a
it'd
parent
be
as well.
better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of those other stories you tell yourself. They can, but I can do it better.
Better. So
Or
did you ever,
right. Or right.
absolutely, the right way. Did you ever catch yourself constructing a new version of the story when the old one stopped holding, like upgrading to like a justification? Yeah.
I think that was always kind of that justification. It stayed in that department, in that lane, in that compartment, I guess. Like you were saying, to compartmentalize it. Like the reason I have to do all of these things is because of this. And then again, in your blinders and your plow through and keep going 70 miles an hour to the finish line, you can't change. You don't move to another slope. This is the slope. It's the only slope. So that's the one you're on. That's what we're doing. Right. And so that mentality stays there with you through all of that. How
Well,
you do it changes, how you
right.
do the schedule or manager, those things change, but the story stays the same.
Hmm. So what would it have meant about you if you had stopped? And was that fear actually inside the story that you were telling yourself? Was it?
I mean, what stop? I mean, that never entered it
They
didn't
never did.
enter the
No.
conversation.
Not even pause or hold back. Yeah.
There was no stop. That wasn't a word. Again, help is a 4-letter word.
Right.
Stop is a 4-letter word. We don't use those words. Like, these are not on the option table because they somehow weaken us. That's kind of that mentality. And it's still the mentality of a lot of people saying help or I need help or please help me. That's a 4-letter word, and we are weakened if we have to say it. So that's not on the option list. Saying stop, are you kidding me? We were talking about opening more stores.
Mm.
Stop. There was no stop. There was, what else can I do?
No, it's certainly I'm curious. It sounds like a very long-standing perception, belief, part of culture for you.
Yeah, it's very much, I think, a very Appalachian
Right. So
plow
tell us
through and
about
carry on.
tell us about that if that
Yeah,
to make
I
that distinction for many. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very different. I grew up in a family business. My grandfather started a business long before I was born, but he very highly intelligent. He used the Korean War to get the GI Bill and get an engineering degree after being in a coal mine at like 14, 15 years old. He went, that's not happening, not staying here. And so he went and got a degree in engineering, and he opened his own shop and got all of his brothers out of the shop. My dad, my uncles all worked in there. They either have engineering degrees or business and accounting degrees. I went to journalism school, so I don't know. I'm the creative. They're the boxes, but I learned how to translate, and accounting boxes and engineering into the creative side. But that was the mentality, you go down into a coal mine and you keep working because the guy beside you is working too, and you can't let him down. It's that very team mentality. You can't let him down because by letting him down, it may cause an accident and he may fall. And so that was very much the family mentality because they all, all of my great uncles all came out of that coal mine. They all thought that way. We work not for us, but for the people around us, for the people we love, for the people we care about. And that's how we show them that we love them. And it's very Appalachian culture. Now, when you're growing up with it, you just go, no, that's normal.
Yeah.
It wasn't
You
until
accept it.
years later and being other places that you go, no, that's different. It's a different way of thinking.
So as I'm listening to, I'm wondering, as you know, we live in a culture that tends to associate resilience with a very particular image, stoic, relentless, unaffected. That image is largely masculine. And I wonder whether part of your pushing through wasn't just personal drive, but also a kind of quiet proof to yourself and to others that you could meet that standard. So was gender ever part of the story, consciously or not, for you? I've
I
heard you
don't,
say that I was one of the girls playing with the boys. There were no sports, and
yeah.
I've heard you say that. So
I guess it didn't dawn on me in the moment
no, I didn't think it
at
did, and
all.
but looking
Yeah,
back, I mean, there's so many. You're talking about that old school, even European mentality where we've got to, we push through things, we don't complain.
push through. And
Yeah,
I did.
yeah.
I played on all boys soccer teams. I was one of one or two girls on the ski team. Most of the girls who were on the ski team, it was me and the girlfriends of a couple of the older guys on the team. So you also, I was around the guys a lot. I tend to have a little bit more of a sporty kind of background. So I enjoy some of my closest friends are my guy friends. So if they're all doing it, I can too. And it never dawned on me that there were elements I saw that were different in different spaces. But in far as the mentality to work that hard, I mean, my mom worked and she worked hard, and I saw her do that too. So it never dawned on me that there would be a difference in how women approached than men approach. There was a difference in how long it took her to get there because, she had kids, and so things had changed, but she worked just as hard as he did. So there wasn't a difference in that to me.
See, I'm sure you proved yourself by example. You proved your worth, regardless. It had nothing to do. So you weren't looking at it like I'm keeping up with the boys. I'm just keeping up. And
I'm just
I'm
keeping up.
excelling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't make a difference. And so that was just internalized. So I can see I've worked with people over the years where they were, let's say, high performers in different fields. And that's when they try to, you mentioned it earlier, you take what you've learned in one aspect of your life and you bring it over to another. And so that mentality persists. But then there are times when we're doing this and we're ignoring our personal needs at times. in order for the greater good. And that's the way you've associated it. So I want to ask about something that doesn't always get named directly, the work you do in leadership. So women in leadership often carry an additional layer of pressure around strength. This sense that slowing down or admitting depletion or pausing might be interpreted differently for them than it would be for any male colleague. That if some, and it sometimes would confirm that some people would saying, that dynamic exists, the need to prove what you're doing. Do you notice that in the work you do with female leaders?
There definitely is a different approach.
Is there more pressure? I'm trying to figure out too. And what do they say to themselves? And how do you get them through all that? Because I'm sure it's something you confront.
There is a different pressure because we have women, like I have taken into account in various jobs over the years, and women that I work with, there's that conversation of, well, we got married and we want to have kids in the next year or two. So my boss kind of made a hint that they didn't really look at me for this promotion because they realize I'm going to probably be pregnant in the next year. So they don't want somebody who's gone for 6 months and you're like, I'm not even pregnant yet. It could take 5 years before I'm pregnant, but I can't have a promotion now. Or, conversations when we have to say, the kids are sick at school and school calls, you need to come pick them up. More often than not, they're calling mom. And mom's the one who has to leave and rearrange the day and change the schedule. And the people left behind are going, oh, she's not really committed because it's more important to go pick up the kids. I have lost promotions and it's been a direct line to, well, you're a single mom, so we just didn't know. I'm like, I'm already doing the job. You just didn't give me the title or the paycheck. I literally do the work. And then I had to train the person who took that job for me, which was a man. So I was like, so I'm still doing the job, but is still not getting paid for it. And we see that as women. We see other women that have to go through that. We have been there as women. I was just at a tech conference that was a women in tech. And there were a lot of men in the room, but it was a lot of focus on women and expanding into this tech fields. And it was funny because it didn't matter the age group or the generation. Every woman in the room had a different story because it kind of came up. How many times have you been, patted on the head or, the comment made about, look, the girls in the room let us explain to her, or it's still happening to my 24-year-old daughters. I have two 24-year-olds. They still get it in their work. And it's like, we've made so many strides in other places, but we still don't have that stride. So there is fear to kind of step up in those different roles, or how will we be perceived, or how weakness will be perceived. Somehow I'm weak and committed, not part of the team because I need to work from home for 2 days because a kid's sick. Other people don't get that same kind of thing put on them, or because you're a single mom. That's you go even into the next layer of, well, you're a single mom, so I don't want to put too much on your time. But no, I'm fine.
No, that is a challenge for many. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about how fortunate the clients and the people that you work with are to have those experiences that you've had and can take them. And it's so important too, when you come from a different background, the different businesses, different fields that you've been in, and you can transfer that and now bring people to the next level. So I say this sincerely, that you're coming from a place of personal experience and worked experience. And as a parent myself, and you're a parent, and also the gender bias that tends to occur, you can really speak to that and empower others. So I'm imagining that this is something that is true to your heart, and you're living it and proving it on a daily basis. That's just wonderful to hear. I just want to mention.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I hope I am a help to all of them, and so people who are listening to this. You always hope that you are helping, even in the smallest way that you can.
Because I think the people who get to work with you are truly fortunate. What you bring to your clients is not just coaching. It's something far deeper than that. You have lived this. You have felt the pull to keep going, even when everything inside was telling you to stop, or when you've confronted any kind of bias. You've been in the same place where you can tell what the signals are. You can transfer that to others and identify it for them, because everyone has their own narrative about why they don't want to listen. They just want to do it their way. But you can give that fair warning about what might happen and what might occur. And in a way, the coaching that you provide, I'm sure it just, you take it to a different level that perhaps many others could not. And honestly, I think, the uniqueness also from your competitive work as an athlete, that sets you up in a separate category to begin with. And anyone who has an experience about that can certainly, I'm sure you garner an extensive amount of respect when people hear that. I'm not sure if that you notice that. Is that the case?
People appreciate it. To sometimes they appreciate it more than others times. It's nice when I can then pivot and go over to, okay, well, you're not an athlete, you may not, but I can turn that into a theater kid or a
You're right.
band kid because the same concepts hit in a
Hmm.
lot of these different areas. So it's nice to be able to go, okay, let's translate what I'm talking about into what you're talking about. I think that's maybe the gift I tell people all the time. In various roles of my life, I'm like, I'm the translator from this to where, from high management to reality. I'm the translator from this team to that team. Now I'm a translator for kind of what you're going through. And I try to be kind about it and at the same time hold up the mirror that they need to see so that they get where they need to go, not where I
Yes.
want them to go. Because what I want is irrelevant.
I appreciate hearing that. You're listening to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. If today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It truly helps others find the show and supports the work we're doing here. What, from your experience now in the work you're doing in coaching and in training, what would be a useful thing for listeners to hear, a perspective that you have or an approach? What do you notice and what do you see that you'd like to share?
I think the biggest thing that we all want to avoid is that pause because well, I don't want to do X because it's uncomfortable, it's hard, it's whatever. The way we grow, the way we get better is uncomfortable. Back to that sports background or if you were somebody who was in the band in school or the theater kid, you went to rehearsals, you went to band practice, you went to, whatever sport practice and you did those things over and over and over. As adults, we go to the gym, we go run, we weight lift, whatever the thing that is,
Mm-hmm.
those things are hard. They're uncomfortable, but it's how we stay or become healthy, right? The same thing is true in how we approach career and life and work. It's going to be uncomfortable, but that's a good thing. And butterflies in the stomach don't mean that you shouldn't do it. The comfortable of, I know you want to do this. Let's try this and see what happens and go for that. It's not to be ignored. It's actually to be embraced.
Right.
Those pauses are required to be able to hear that from wherever it comes from in you. That fire in the belly is one of my journalism school professors always said. If you've got fire in the belly, you know you're on the right track.
I'm also curious, what aspect of the work do you enjoy most when working in the
I
work
love
you're doing
people
now?
having their own aha moments. And it's not about me. You've had these conversations and you've tried to, show them different things and bring things to light. And then you see one day it clicked. And then when Aaron, I did this and it worked. And then this other thing came up with, whatever the other thing is. And I used the same kind of tool. I just turned it a little bit and it worked over here too. And you're like, okay, look. So they built the tool and then they even started to learn. It's like building a recipe. They got the recipe down and then they started to learn what you can add and take away and zhuzh over here and mess with over there for this next whatever problem is. And those are really happy moments for me because you realize they're in a place they're going to keep moving down that path and finding the more success in the things that they want to do.
Well put. I'm curious then, based on the experience you had personally with shutting down and almost rewriting a narrative to continue to keep going and ignoring signs, what do you see in leaders, in business leaders, anyone? How do you demonstrate to them or how do you point out to them what they're going through is something you went through, and how do you integrate that so they could be more receptive and open? Because many times people want to know that they think they're different than you. Like, oh, that was you. I'm better than that. I know I'm not supposed to touch the oven, but I'm going to touch the oven and I won't get burned, whatever the
I'll be
example might
fine.
be.
My
Right.
fingers
I'll
are
be
extra.
fine. Right.
Yeah.
So How does that, have you encountered that? And
You
what
encounter
was
it
that
a
like?
good bit with leaders. Usually by the time they're talking to me, they've already seen a certain element of it somewhere. But I think one of the first ones that I kind of like to point out to folks. So, maybe I'm in a company and working with a team of leaders and doing some kind of training with the group as a whole. And you start to kind of, you're listening, you're picking things out, and you
Right.
realize that there's somebody in the group and they're constantly going, well, they do this and they do that. And these people over here, and I just don't understand how to fix all of these other people in my organization. Because that's usually a lot of times in an organizational setting, you're talking to the leader who's like, they all need fixed.
Mm,
And so you start to be able to turn that, well, there's 75 of them and one of you. That's my point. I just don't have time to do. Maybe the one that we can change or work on or have a different approach might be the one, because it's easier to start at one than 15 or 75 or however many people you lead in your organization. But it's the warning sign to me when I'm working with somebody is when they start going, well, that those
so,
people, because it's real easy to blame
mhm.
and point fingers. It's a lot harder. So that's when you start to go, okay, let's change where the mirror's pointed. Let's turn the camera around
Mm,
and start
I like
putting
that analogy.
some concepts. And that's where we start, because we can't change 75 people. I don't care how many times I show up to train and teach and coach. I can't do 75 people. It's just not a number that you're going to magically, but I can one.
Yeah, oftentimes people have a blind spot. What you're doing is you're shedding some light on that. You're exposing it, bringing it out to the open. But I'm sure your sophisticated manner in coming across, and you're very respectful, and you have this amount of knowledge. Everyone's brand new, so they don't know you that well until they get to know you. And then I'm sure you have this. This is what I think makes the work that you're doing so unique, and that anyone working with you could be so fortunate to have you lead them. Tell me about. I want to hear your impression of. I have kids. My kids are in their 20s. I have three. My daughter, my two sons. So, what's it like with Gen Z kids and training them or having them in the workforce? Do you hear employers, leaders, owners? Do they talk about the ones who are Gen X or
Yeah.
baby boomers?
So
Do
all
they?
of mine fit in
Yeah.
that Gen Z. The oldest one is like right on the bubble. So sometimes she'll do something. I'm like, oh, that was very millennial of you. And most of the time it's very Gen Z.
Right.
So it's
So
different,
tell me
but
about that.
several of my kids have also worked in our restaurants. So they worked for mom. And so they saw both sides of it. They knew what it looked like at home and they knew what it looked like at work. So it is very different. It helps me to translate when I'm having generational conversation. And this is why when you communicate with your Gen Z staffers or that it's not going
That's what.
over well,
Tell us more
'cause
about that. Yeah.
it's vital because they do see it very differently. But I also think, and I know I can speak to my kids have certainly learned from seeing my burnout from their side of it, that they really focus on, I don't want to end up there. I don't want to put myself in those kind of situations. And so I think Gen Z as a whole has kind of learned that, but I definitely know it for my own kids because they talk to me about it. Yeah, I have two daughters who are 24. The boys are still here and they go to college. We live in a college town, so they go to college here. So they're still in. And then the oldest is my stepdaughter, and she lives up the street. And so she's very much into her very adult phases of life. We have those conversations and they saw it and they're learning from those things that we did and learning how to have those conversations. But if you have that conversation at work and say, I would like work life balance, a boomer is going to lose their mind at work life balance. Some Gen Xers are going to lose their minds at work life balance. It's like, okay, well, how about we change the word? Let's not call it work life balance. Let's call, can I have a flexible schedule where I still come into the office, my full 40 hours a week or whatever that is, but I don't have to do it 8 to 5. I can do it in this window, and start to be creative. Don't work life balance them. There's no such thing. When I was growing up, my mom was in leadership and management at the hospital in town, and then dad, family business. So there's leaders all around me. They're everywhere. Can't get away from them. We took an answering machine on vacation and hooked it up in the phone at the condo at the beach because there were no cell phones because they didn't want people on at the business, at the hospital, God forbid a client, the world would end. And so there was an answering machine so they could call us on vacation and leave a message. And my parents would go in and out at various points of the day. More my dad, because my dad hated the beach. So it was way more him than my mom. But go back inside and check it constantly. I knew how to write and present and analyze a business quote for a potential client years before I even understood the concept of why I would need to do it, because I would sit at a table and I'd watch them do it. I went to coal shows and was the girl at the coal shows talking to prospective clients and coal mine operators and all these people. I knew those things. It was part of everyday life. So I learned from them. My kids have learned from me. And having those generational conversations are so important. And what we've each learned from each other and how we want to be different or better or be able to go, you know what? My parents weren't there a lot. And I think it's okay. Parents should hear they are not expected to show up to absolutely everything in life. Kids need to learn how to have their sport or their activity or their whatever without mom and dad sitting right beside them. And at the same time, that's part of work-life balance. Today, I get to go to your soccer game. On the game on Thursday, I can't be there. I'm going to be at Sis's cheerleading practice, or I need to be at my own women's group, or, that's the balance that we're looking for. It's not a 50-50. It's not an actual, it's very pendulum. And when we start talking like that, then we all talk at the same playing field. It's when we start to use these words that trigger different generations that the chaos ensues.
Absolutely true. Is there anything in relation to the Gen Z kids? Is there anything that employers or anyone who owns a company, a business, what suggestion would you give them so they can understand what our kids are like? Let's put it like
I
that.
think part of the problem is because it goes back to that, we were talking about women and men and how women kind of are perceived differently because they have to go get the kid or whatever. And so they're somehow pigeonholed. Gen Z is very much getting that. It's they're lazy.
Yeah.
They are very strict about I work 8 to 4. I'm leaving at 4 o'clock because my schedule says 8 to 4. And, that's something they've learned from us and went, I'm going to incorporate that balance in life. I'm going home. That's the end of my day. And so we take that as they're lazy. We take that as they don't want to be part of the team. We take that they aren't a part of the organization and they just want to move on. And it's those conversations that really create so much opportunity. It's sitting down and going, I know that officially you're 8 to 4, but again, they're looking for life balance. So maybe their schedule's better 11 to 7, right? Maybe that's better for them. And
Be more
it really
flexible.
doesn't hurt my business for them to work 11 to 7. All kinds of stuff's getting done for the next day or for a different team. And so having that conversation, it's not that they are rigid. It's not that they are lazy. They just approach the situation different. So it's even having the conversation. Yes, if I'm going to ask you to come in 2 hours early because we're going to have some kind of training that I need you here, I'm going to give you the flexibility to take that off earlier in the week. There's nothing wrong with that flexibility, but somehow in our Gen X boomer generations, we're like, oh, that means you just put in 42 hours. Well, no, I pay you for 40. And really creating those conversations, helps you, but also helps them. And it grows the team because now the team's like, oh, I'm in. Like they understand that's my approach. It's not that I'm lazy. It's not that I don't want to. But in the same direction, Gen Z gets really upset if they're like, I have this idea and they want to rush into your office and tell you about it right this second. You're like, I'm really busy. I've got this other thing that isn't even something they need to know what it is. They're not at the need to know part of this conversation. So you're like, well, write it up in an email. I'll look over it and we'll talk about it tomorrow. Well, a Gen Z is going to be completely offended that you're blowing them off, that you don't respect them. You don't want to hear their ideas. And in your mind, you're just trying to have the clear thought to be able to sit down and have a clear conversation to understand what they're saying. So it's even teaching Gen Z what that conversation is that says, okay, great. So I'm going to send that email with kind of my thought process and say, I'm available at this time, and this time. then we'll talk about it. It's not a blow off. It's somehow how you have to manage the many things happening in your day.
You've covered all the bases. I'm just so impressed. That's just
Well,
so.
thank you.
Before we wrap up, one more big question that I like to ask everyone. If you can go back as the person you are now, with everything that you've learned, and sit with yourself in the middle of all that occurred, what would you want that version of yourself to know? And is there anything that version of you would want to know looking back now? What would you?
I think I would tell the younger version, and maybe I will tell what I tell my kids, because I consider that the younger version of me. Define success your own way. Don't chase it. Don't try to be what you think you are supposed to be. Create your success by your own definition. And that changes how you chase, right? Like you're not chasing anymore, you're creating. And that's so different and such a change. But that's what I tell my kids. So that's what I would tell my younger self. We had this what success is. And success is the big house and the big car and the expensive vacations. But that's not really happy. And if you're not enjoying it and you're on the phone with work half a vacation, checking the answering machine in the condo, what good did it do you?
Erin, before we wrap up, I just have to say this directly to you. The work you are doing matters enormously, and I don't say it lightly. We live in a culture that has almost trained leaders to disconnect from themselves, to treat their emotions as weakness, to treat their body as signals, as inconvenience, and to push through the discomfort and keep performing at all costs. And the people sitting across from you that you're coaching, they carry that also. And it seems that they've been carrying it for years, perhaps. And what you bring to them is something, they cannot get anywhere else, because it comes from a place of real experience, real understanding, and real compassion for what that journey looks like. You're not just helping them perform better, you're helping them survive better, and you're helping them lead from a place of wholeness rather than depletion. And that ripples out to their teams, to their families, to every person that they touch. So I want your clients and anyone considering working with you to hear this clearly. You are fortunate to have Erin in your corner. What she does is not just coaching, it is a form of protection, of care, of transformation that very few people are equipped to offer. And I'm so grateful that you're here able to talk about this work. I just want to thank you again for being here.
Well, thanks. I appreciate all that. That's so nice.
It's really from the bottom of my heart. I mean, this conversation, it just really has shed a significant amount of light on you as a person, as an individual, as a mom, as a wife, as a leader. You've offered something rare, a story that begins not with ambition, but with interruption. And in doing so, you've reframed what so many professionals quietly experience, but they rarely name it. That burnout isn't failure, that being overwhelmed is not a weakness. It is the body delivering a message the mind has been unwilling to send. And what stays with me from our conversation is your distinction between discipline and disconnection, and how easily someone can misinterpret what's happening. And the idea that agency isn't about control, it's about courage to respond honestly to what your system is actually telling you. So you've shown us that the pivot point doesn't always look like a bold leap forward, but sometimes it looks like finally it's going still. So to our listeners, wherever you are right now, still functioning but quietly depleted, already in the stop or somewhere early in the whisper of unsustainable, I want to leave you with the question at the heart of this episode, what I think is at the heart of it. What is your body trying to tell you that your calendar keeps overriding? You don't have to have collapse to begin listening. In fact, that's Erin's whole story. The invitation is to listen before the system enforces the pause for you. If today's conversation stirred something, a recognition, a discomfort, a quiet knowing, stay with that. Don't rush past it. That stirring might be the beginning of your own pivot. To learn more about Erin's work with leaders and teams, visit CoachErinTreacy.com, and I'll put more in the episode online. And if this episode resonated, share it with someone who might need permission to slow down. Until next time, this is Pivot Point, Strategy for Change, exploring the interruptions that quietly become our greatest strategies for living and leading. So for anyone that's looking for more information about the work I do here on Pivot Point Strategy for Change, you can also find me on Substack and Spotify and Apple. Thank you again, Erin. I appreciate your time and spending time with us. I truly appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoy the opportunity to help other people and tell this story, not for me, but so that they can see themselves in it and find their way out.
Truly, we appreciate it. And I want to leave everyone with the one question I like to leave with before we close up. Think about it. What's your pivot point?